And this week we are talking about macro photography, otherwise known as photographing small stuff. All right, so for most of you, who are just using point and shoot cameras, you got to kind of make do. You put your camera in the flower mode, and that changes up the ability for the autofocus to work. Now, if you're lucky enough to have an SLR camera, or when you get out in the workplace, you'll probably be given an SLR camera. What you're going to need is some accessories to improve your macro photography. Now, a lot of cost-effective ones, some start getting into more expensive items. So, very simple thing we can get is called diopters. These are like the filters for a camera. You remember we talked about like the polarizing filters. So these diopters right here, you can see them. They just screw onto the end of the lens, and they're essentially magnifying glasses that go on the end of the lens, and they give you a little bit of magnification, and you can even stack them up. So like this is a set of diopters where you have plus 1/2 magnification, plus 1 times magnification, plus 2 times magnification. And so you can actually stack all these up and get a 3.5 time magnification. Something else we can do, we can play around with the focal length of the lens and use an extension tube. So you put the tube on the camera, and then you put the lens on the tube, and suddenly now your standard 50 millimeter lens, you can add additional magnification to it by putting these extension tubes on. And these tubes literally are just that, it's just a tube, it's a hollow tube, and you put that tube onto the camera, and then your lens attaches to the tube. Bellows are kind of popular. They're not really useful in the field. You can really only use these back at the police department. But with bellows, again, you're able to move the lens back and forth, kind of like an accordion here. Move the lens back and forth until you're in as tight as you want to be. Reversing rings, these ones are really kind of strange. I always equate this, remember when you were a little kid and you looked through a pair of binoculars? You ever turn the binoculars around and look through the backside of the binoculars, and things suddenly became magnified in a different way. So you can do the same thing with your camera lens. You can actually put your camera lens on the camera backwards with a reversing ring, and it will suddenly create magnification. Inexpensive device, very hard to use. And then, of course, we have actual macro lenses, which, here we go. Sorry, somehow the slides are out of order. But we have macro lenses, so lenses that are designed for close up. And here's just a picture, too, of showing like there's your reversal ring. And so your lens is actually on the camera backwards. Here's an extension tube on the camera, and the lens is sitting, again, away from the camera. So you're able to artificially create magnification, but our macro lenses create magnification for us. They're designed for magnification. They are magnifying glasses. All right, so when we start dealing with magnification, we have a number of different things that we have to worry about as it relates to, how far away the camera is from the subject, what kind of magnification your lens has, whether or not you're going to use your autofocus and what your autofocus's abilities are. So lots of little factors that play into function here. Even our lighting, and then how long you have to have exposure. I'm going to say this, for most of your macro photography, you want it on a tripod. Doing a lot of macro photography off of the tripod, sometimes we're talking about longer shutter speeds because of the aperture settings for getting a good close-up. And so you're going to want to have the camera on a tripod, so any vibration, any movement you have holding it is not going to affect your focus. We talk a lot about getting creative. We do a lot of our macro photography back at the PD, back at the police department, and so we set up different kinds of setups with tables and tripods and lighting sources, trying to get the best lighting, and we can get in quite close in and see things, and even getting in closer. So here you've got this coin, and you've got this little piece of rock, and we can get in even closer on that rock using just good magnification skills. Even the idea of mixing and matching different devices and things to get in close, this is more artistic photography than crime scene, but look at how in tight to this flower we have gotten. All right, now speaking of light, we need to worry about getting light in close. So there's lots of different issues with lighting. Sometimes we use a flash that attaches to the end of the camera lens, ring mount flash. Nikon has a different setup, a macro flash system, where Canon loves their ring lights. Nikon doesn't do a ring light, but they have these macro flashes that are smaller flash units that attach to the end of a lens, and you can have all three of them, have four of them. You can just have a couple of them, so you're creating oblique lighting, or you're creating a hard light. With the Canon ones, the ring light, usually you can activate both sides or just one side or the other, so you can get some oblique lighting going on. So lots of different options out there. Just kind of one of those, whatever works best for you and whatever works for your agency's budget. Oops. So some of the things that happen here, we talk about flashes and our backgrounds. I don't remember who I stole this from, but this is not me. Definitely not me if you look at the mustache. But what you have here is a piece of equipment that needed a close-up photo of it. And so let's go through kind of the setup here as it relates to trying to get an image of this little piece of metal. And so in the initial setup, the guy does everything right, and this is what you get. It's kind of hard to see. So let's change it. Let's try oblique lighting. There we go. A little bit better. Way too much shadow though. So maybe try a different background. Maybe we'll try with a gray background instead of that white background. All right, a little bit better. Still got that shadow. Let's try one more time. Let's try and eliminate that shadow by, we've got the gray background, but now we have a white backstop, which won't show up in the picture, but will reflect some of that flash intensity back at the object. It's cut down our shadow, but not that much. All right. Maybe we need to get our object up off the surface it's on, and we'll put it on a piece of glass. And so now that shadow, in theory, should go someplace else. Yep, there we go. Now we got it. Shadow's way down here. A little distracting though. You can see some reflection. It's a good photo, but we could do better. Why don't we change what color we've got below the object? So now the guy's gone with yellow. Ooh, there we go. Got rid of most of the reflection. There's still a little over here. You still got that shadow over there. It's distracting, but it's not horrid. Let's just try it. Let's try and eliminate the shadow altogether then. Let's put a black backdrop down there. There we go. Now our object is isolated. All we're really looking at is the object. We've picked up some reflection here, but we're just looking at the object, the thing that's most important to us. So again, thinking too about the flash angle, looking at some differences and looking at what we can see. So let's get in really tight to this quarter, and there we can see, some details. But take a look at this. If we get oblique lighting, look at the difference in what we're seeing as it relates to the scratches. And imagine if we're talking about impression evidence, and you're talking about tool marks and scrapings on a door frame, on a bullet casing, on a whatever. And we get in tighter. Look at how much more detail we can see with some of our oblique lighting. We can see more of those scratches. They're here, but they're more defined here. So kind of like when we talk about footwear impression evidence, also the oblique lighting, shining the light across the footwear impression so that you can see it a little bit better. All right. One more thing that we have to worry about too with our macro photography is we're getting in tight to objects, trying to see them better. Problem is the flash intensity and even the autofocus are going to have some errors, so we need to have something to focus in on. So here we have a situation where trying to get the image of this threads on this pipe, and again, I stole this from somewhere. This is not me. And so what we end up doing is putting a colored object behind what we're trying to shoot, kind of like what I showed you before, where they tried the gray matte, they tried different colored mattes underneath that little tool piece, and look, we get a much better image where now we're picking up and we're bouncing some light, and we're picking up the ability to have the camera sense the object here, not the room around the object. Something else that is kind of useful for us is axial lighting. And again, this is back at the police department kind of thing, where what we end up doing is we create a light source that's going to shine an even amount of light over our object. And axial lighting is pretty easy. We actually have little boxes or kits that you can buy, and essentially what you do is you have this little box, and there's a little piece of glass, and the light goes up against the glass. And so when we take a picture of whatever's down here, the light is going to go through that glass and make that whole sheet of glass glow. And because it's at that angle, that glow just goes down onto the object. So our lighting source goes across the glass. It does not actually directly hit the object, but because the camera is taking a picture through that glass that is glowing, we in turn then light up an object. And so that's how we get these good shots looking at the back ends of say, bullet casings. So very useful back at the police department, getting some good imagery. Think about mixing in what I'm talking about here with macro photography in with our fingerprints and the alternate light sources that we had talked about earlier, and getting in tight and getting a good shot of all that ridge detail in a fingerprint. Don't forget, we are talking about getting in close to objects, so we need to worry about scale. So think about the scales that we're getting. Think about this fact that our scales should be non-reflective because we're getting in tight with lights, and we want them certified. So, it doesn't matter whether you buy them from Nikon or whether you buy them from the Crime Lab supply companies, but get good scales. Don't be using, Walmart rulers. We don't know for sure if they are truly the scale we think. So make sure that we're getting the scales from our trusted Crime Lab supply companies. Last little bit here. Don't forget about visual storytelling. Here we've got the idea of what we are looking at, and now we want to get down inside of this device where there is some malfunction that has caused some sort of injury, problem, whatever. And if you started with this picture, would you really know what you're looking at? We need to start with the overall pictures. We need to start with the big pictures and work our way down into the small. So don't forget that aspect. And I think I commented on some people's homeworks in the last two assignments there with creating a crime scene and with creating a crash scene where objects were shown for the first time in the close-up, where I could not see them in the scene. And suddenly now you have a picture of a beer can sitting on a car seat. And what you had given me was all pictures of around the car, and then suddenly a picture of a beer can on the car seat. Open the door, stand back, look into the car, take a photo. So it's the same idea, show me an object, like say my water bottle here, and then, take a picture of the close-up of the fingerprint left on my water bottle. Alrighty, folks, this is probably going to be my last recording, won't it? This is week 15, so next week you will have your final, and hope everybody had a good semester. Make sure that you fill out these student evaluations once the class is done, because I cannot improve upon my teaching methods, and I cannot improve upon the class unless I have good feedback. I hope you all had a good semester. You folks were a great class, and I will see you in future forensic science classes. Bye.